and I just couldn't, I couldn't do anything but go back. So I came back and I got a internship, non-paid, here in San Francisco at Sports Byline, which is a national, a national radio network that has a bunch of affiliates on a bunch of across a bunch of different terrestrial stations nationwide. They also were on the American Forces Network and what have you. So it seemed like a good fit. So I came in and I worked hard for about 3 months before they offered me a gig to be a studio engineer. So I worked as a studio engineer for a while and saw that was, I was getting hours. They weren't necessarily the best hours. I was working, really bad shifts, 10 o'clock to 3 a.m. shifts and, things of that nature. But I was more than happy to do it because my thinking was eventually I'll get to the next level.
Daniel,
eventually I got to be sorry.
Yeah, I just want to know at this point, are you frustrated or disappointed in the opportunities that have been in front of you? I mean, the first one, you thought there might be a better offer there.
No.
I mean, are you still excited?
I was frustrated that I didn't get the opportunity to stay in town for a full-time job, but I was not disappointed with having to work, really tough jobs that didn't pay well and didn't necessarily give you the kind of hours where you could be social in a way that you want to be at 21, 22 years old, especially coming from, quite frankly, one of the best, if not the best party school in the nation. There's a reason why, Playboy consistently ranks Penn State as one of the better party schools in the nation. I mean, it's everywhere. And that's not a knock on Penn State. I loved it. I enjoyed it. But, you get to be 22, you still are in that mindset, but you're also kind of juxtaposing that with having to be an adult.
Yeah.
And I was happy that I was able to even land something. There were so many people I went to school with who didn't even get an opportunity out of the gates. And by the same token, there were plenty of people who were given opportunities that, I know a lot of people who were maybe not as, who worked harder kind of didn't necessarily understand. So, I mean, it was kind of across the board. It was a weird thing where because so many people left school and ended up in different positions, it was just, for me, I was happy to have an opportunity. So I was more than happy to take, the really bad hours, the really low pay, with the understanding that eventually I would be up, ahead of everybody once I got, up the ladder, if you will. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't frustrated as much at the beginning. I was fine with it. And eventually I became, the producer for the flagship show, Sports Byline with Ron Barr, as well as a few other shows across the network. So, and I hate to toot my own horn, but I was damn good at it. I was booking guests left and right. I was getting people who, I don't think many people expected me to get, college coaches, NFL coaches, Major League Baseball players, Hall of Fame players, so on and so forth. I was doing really well. And I was like, I'm clearly, not on air, which is what I want to do, but I'm doing well enough where I could be satisfied with not being on air if I'm still being a success, if I'm still a success behind the scenes, and doing something really special with someone else who may have a little bit of a higher skill set on air.
Yeah, sure.
I was fine with that. But it got to a point, fast forward a little bit further, we're inching on 4 years at this company and there are no other opportunities. There is no change in pay. I was getting paid the same amount, maybe more hours, but the same actual dollar amount per hour as I was when I was a studio engineer, which is, kind of the entry level point, if you will.
Uh-huh.
And it seemed like every few months there was always a competition that was being brought up by our owner, here's this new hot shot, youngster coming in and they're challenging for your job. And then all of a sudden that person wouldn't be there anymore because they couldn't do my job. And then I got more tasks. I had to be a social media manager. I had to help with some publicity portions of the business. I had to help with a couple marketing aspects, so on and so forth. So I was, at this point, getting to think, I need a new opportunity. So my dream had always been to work at KMBR, which is the local radio station here in San Francisco. When I talked about listening to radio on my way to things when I was in high school, that's the station I would listen to. They would have, obviously, Giants games, and at the time they had 49er, Golden State Warriors, all of them. They had everything. But they also had a lot of personalities who I grew up with, and I always wanted to work with these people. So I had already talked to some of the people over there, for the year heading into this kind of towards the end of my tenure at Sports Byline. I had been talking to them, and they always told me that there was an opportunity coming, just kind of, bear down and keep your head down, and, the opportunity will come. And all of a sudden the opportunity came, and it was to be a producer for the Damon Bruce show. Damon Bruce was their kind of young, up and coming. I don't want to say he was up and coming. He had been in the business for a decade, but based on the ages of the people who they had on air, he was kind of the up and coming, next in line to be the star of the station personality. So I took a week off. I was told I needed to basically audition for a week. I took a week off and essentially did what I did. I was told that they went with someone in-house instead. And I got really disheartened.
Yeah, I bet. So how do you recover from that? I mean, you put a lot of effort in, a lot of hopes and prayers, and grinding away, and you got overlooked in an industry that you really had hoped to be a part of.
So I've always been somebody who is a resilient person. Again, you go back to not getting into any high schools. At that point, I could have easily quit and said, you know what, I'm going to just wait till I'm 16, get my GED, and then go into the workforce. Didn't do that, went around, did what I needed to do, with a chip on my shoulder, and then got into a bunch of colleges. Here we are again, trying to get into what I thought was my dream job, and I got looked over. And what I found the most disheartening wasn't so much that I didn't get the job. It was that from the people who I knew who worked there, it never seemed like there was really going to be an opportunity for me to actually get that job. It was almost like they needed to audition someone, and I had knocked on the door so often that they just kind of threw me a bone. And I don't want to say I'm arrogant, but I'm definitely sure of myself, and I'm the kind of person who doesn't believe in the idea that I can't, kind of change someone's mind into believing that I'm the best option for a given task. And so to kind of have that not go my way, and then to find out that the person was always going to get this job, and it felt really like it was like the cards were stacked against me from the beginning, and I didn't even know. So my next step was to go ahead and apply for every job I saw, which is probably something I could have been doing already, but I wanted to work at this particular station. So now, with that not being an option, I applied to every job I could across the nation. I wasn't really worried about where I would end up.
Yeah.
And time after time, I would hear no, or, more often than not, and this is a pet peeve of mine, I didn't get a response of any kind. So the only thing I did hear back from was another kind of local station under the CBS umbrella. It was an FM station. It was a rock station. And I was told that, hey, we really like your qualifications. Come in for an interview. We'll see if we can, bring you on board. The pay was substantially less. The hours were going to be substantially less. But I was told that eventually there would be something at the end of the tunnel if I did enough to ensure that I was going to be there long term. So I worked there as now going back to as a studio engineer. And the reason I took that step back was because while all this stuff was happening with KMBR back at Sports Byline, we had yet another situation where here comes another person, another young person coming in to try to take your job. And I point blank asked my boss, why do you keep doing this? I've already proven that I'm your guy. I've been here now going on 4 years. Why does this keep happening? And there was no satisfactory answer they could give me. It was a lot of hemming and hawing and, well, that's just kind of how it goes. And it felt like it was not ever going to stop. And, I'm not afraid of competition, but I do get annoyed if I've already proven myself over and over again. And this is, by now, this is already the fifth or sixth person coming in who had a kind of connection to somebody at our station, and they were being brought in despite, in most cases, not even having a resume that could really compete with what I was doing. They definitely didn't have the Rolodex that I had of contacts. So it got to a point where I said, okay, I can't keep being here and not getting paid, not getting, now the frustration is really setting in that you asked about a little while back. So I get into the CBS station and I get there and come to find out that the job is really not as enticing as it was made to seem. It was not really as inclusive in terms of what responsibilities I would have. And it got to be where the hours weren't what was promised. I was told, okay, you'll get at minimum 25 hours a week. You'll probably get closer to 35, 40, but at this point in time, we can only guarantee you 25.
Yeah.
There would be some weeks when I didn't work. And when you're living in the most expensive city in the world, that's just not going to cut it, especially when you're only getting paid, 10 an hour. And that was, I think technically it was above minimum wage at the time, but not by much. And it, you see, all the Marconi awards and all the Murrow awards and all of those things, lined up in the lobby, and you go, you have all of these things, you have all of these high-end executives, but I can't even get 25 hours a week to work here. Like, it seemed very weird to me. And it seemed like that was going on everywhere, because I would talk to a lot of my friends who were also in the same program as me and who actually got jobs. And with the exception of the ones who really got lucky and really got something that was kind of a once in a lifetime special job, which there was only maybe one or two of those guys, everybody else was kind of in the same boat where they would work, and it felt like somebody was always blockading their way up. So after a while I said, okay, well, I need to take a look at my options and do something else, because, at that point I'm, 26, 27, something like that. And it doesn't feel like there's an opportunity to move forward.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm listening to your story, and, you've had a big uphill battle. And, I think that so many people go through that because they go into school with aspirations of being something. They go into a career with aspirations, and they realize that, even with grinding it out and hard work, that it just might not be a fit. And it sounds like a lot of this is where you were at, because you are a hard, dedicated worker, and it just wasn't stacking up right for you. And I know this is where our story kind of takes a twist, because I want to start talking about your film project, because I think sometimes it's important to step back, look at what you're doing, and realize, hey, I got to make a drastic change in my life. And I appreciate that you just said you needed to take a step back yourself. So what was it that you were evaluating, and how'd you look at it? And please tell us about your next step.
So I still thought that sports was the way to go. I wanted to do a lot of marketing stuff. I had realized that, the on-air thing was by now not really seeming like a thing that was going to happen, just because there was a saturation in the market with the rise of podcasts. And there was also this thing where a lot of stations rolled into each other nationwide on the sports side of things. So instead of having a local show, for every kind of major time slot, and then kind of having syndicated things overnight at these radio stations like it was when I was growing up, now all of a sudden it was like everybody had the same, 6 personalities, and then they would have maybe 1 or 2, local guys sprinkled in. So you started seeing more guys who were on ESPN all of a sudden their show was syndicated nationally, and all of a sudden they were on at 3:00 in San Francisco, and that was something that didn't happen